Chapter 3 of A Dear Little Girl's Thanksgiving Holidays by Amy Ella Blanchard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Shrimpfish. Where's the key? Very, very early in the morning, Edna was awake. She was not used to farmyard sounds, and could not tell if it were a lusty rooster, an insistent guinea fowl, or a gobbling turkey whose voice first reached her. But whichever it was, she was quite broad awake while it was yet dark. She lay still for a few minutes, with an uncertain feeling of something not very pleasant overshadowing her. Then she remembered the key.
"Oh, dear," she sighed. "If they can't get into the spring house, there will be no cream for breakfast, and no butter either. The key must be found."
She got up and softly crept to the window. A bright star hung low in the sky, and there was the faintest hint of light along the eastern horizon. Presently Edna saw a lighted lantern bobbing around down by the stable, and concluded that Ira must be up, and that it was morning, or, at least, what meant morning to farmers. She stood watching the light grow in the east, and finally decided that she would dress and be all ready by the time it was light enough to hunt for the lost key. By now she could see well enough to find her clothes, but, fearing lest she should waken her mother, she determined to go to the bathroom at the end of the hall rather than use the washstand in the room where she was. So she gathered up her clothing in her arms and went down the entry, made her toilet, and crept downstairs. There was a light burning in the lower hallway, but it was dark all through the rest of the house, and she was obliged to feel her way through the rooms. There was a noise of someone stirring in the pantry. She opened the door of the kitchen gently and peeped in. A lamp was burning on the table, but no key lay there. Edna tiptoed in quietly and felt on the nail where the key should hang, thrusting aside a gingham apron belonging to Reliance which hung just above its place. But the nail was empty, and she was forced to believe she had dropped the key somewhere between the spring house and the kitchen. She tiptoed out of the kitchen, turned the key of the outside door, and closed it after her as noiselessly as possible, and in another moment was outside in the chill November air. It was rather fearsome to make one's way down dim paths where some wild creature might still be lurking after a night's raid from the woods nearby, and she imagined all sorts of things. First, something stole softly by her and was off like a shot through the tall weeds growing beyond the fence. It was only a rabbit, who was more frightened at Edna than she at it. Next, the bushes parted, and a small white figure crept stealthily forth. The child's heart stood still, and she stopped short. Then came a plaintive meow, and she discovered one of the 3 kittens out on an adventuring tour. She picked up the little creature, which purred contentedly as she snuggled it to her, continuing her way. The garden left behind, there was the lane to be passed through, and here some real cause for fear in Edna's opinion, for the cows that Ira had just finished milking were coming through the bars he had let down. They stumbled along clumsily, following one another over the rail, and ambled on to another set of bars, where they stood till Ira should let them through. At first Edna did not realize that they were not making for the spot where she stood, and she took to her heels, fleeing frantically back to the garden, banging the gate behind her and standing still, waiting till the cows were through and the bars up again. Seeing the cows safely shut out from the lane, she ventured forth again and followed Ira's lantern to the barn. Here she stood looking around, and presently the beams from the lantern fell upon her little figure, with the white kitten still clasped in her arms. Ira looked up in surprise. "Hello," he cried. "What's took you up so airly? Why, I just got through milking, and doggone it, it ain't skeerce light yet."
"I know," said Edna, "but I had to get up early, you see, so as to find the key before breakfast."
"Key? What key?"
The key of the spring house. Reliance gave it to me to carry, and I was to have hung it up on a nail behind the kitchen door, and I forgot all about it till I was in bed. You see, if it isn't found, nobody can have any milk or cream for breakfast."
"Oh, I guess we could manage," returned Ira reassuringly. "Didn't drop it indoors, did you?"
"I don't think so. I looked in the kitchen as I came out, and I didn't find it there. If it had been picked up, it would be on the nail, I should think."
"Most likely it would. It would be there, sure, if Mandy found it. She don't let nothin' stay out of place very long, I can tell ye."
"As long as I didn't find it in the kitchen, I thought I would come here because I saw you had a lantern, and it really isn't quite light enough to see very plainly, is it?"
"No, it ain't. Sun don't rise till somewheres round 7 this time o' year. Well, you come with me, and we'll work our way 'long the path from the spring house, and if we don't find the key we will go inside and inquire. I always find it don't do no harm to ask questions, and that there key is bound to be somewheres betwixt this and the house." He swung his lantern so its rays would shed a broad light along the way, and Edna pattered along just behind him, trying very hard to keep up with his long strides. When at last they reached the spring house, he slackened his pace and began carefully to look to the right and to the left. "You come right straight along, did you?" he questioned. "Didn't go cavortin' off nowheres picking weeds or chasing cats, did you?"
"No, we came as straight as could be. Reliance had the butter and cream, and we didn't stop once."
"Then I guess you likely dropped it inside, for I've searched careful and I can't find it. Maybe when it comes real bright daylight you could look again, but I should advise asking at the house next thing you do." He led the way into the kitchen where Amanda was briskly stirring about. "Well," she began, "what's wantin'? Well, I declare, if there ain't Edna! What's got you up so early, missy? I guess you're like the rest of us. Couldn't sleep for thinking of all that's to do for Thanksgiving." "You ain't picked up the spring house key nowheres about, have you?" asked Ira.
"Why, no. You had it?"
"No, I ain't. But Sissy there says Lyons gave it to her to carry, and she ain't no notion of what she done with it. Thought mebbe she might ha' dropped it in here. She got so worried over it she riz from her bed and come out to hunt it up. Says she was afraid nobody couldn't get no breakfast because of her losing of it."
"I guess we won't suffer for breakfast," said Amanda, looking down kindly at the little girl. "I don't carry back the milk nights this time of year. Any that's left I just set in the pantry, and there is what was left from supper this blessed minute. Butter, too, and cream. Plenty for breakfast. You just rest your mind on that score." "But," said Edna, "you will want a whole lot of things for the Thanksgiving cooking, and what will you do with them all locked up?"
Ira laughed. "'Twouldn't be such an awful job to lift the door from its hinges, and if a body was right spry he could climb in at the window after he prized it open, and the things could be handed out. Besides, we've got all the morning's milk, and there'll be the night's milk and tomorrow's milk, so I don't see that we shan't get along first rate. There is more than one way out of that trouble, ain't there, Mandy?"
"I should say so. Wait till the sun's real high, and I guess we'll find the key fast enough," she said to Edna. "Now you stay right here and don't go running about in the cold. You'll be down sick traipsing about in the wet grass, and then where will your Thanksgiving be?" Thus warned, Edna was content to stay in the kitchen, into which the morning light was beginning to creep, and which was already warm from the big stove. In a few minutes Reliance appeared from the next room where she had been setting the table. She was much astonished to learn that Edna had been down before her. "What in the world did you get up so soon for?" she asked. "To find the key," Edna answered, and then told her all about the search, ending up with, "You haven't seen anything of it, have you, Reliance?" Reliance's face broadened into a smile,
As for answer, she went behind the kitchen door and produced the key from its nail, holding it up to view.
"Why, where in the world did you get it?"
inquired Edna in a tone of surprise.
"It wasn't on the nail when I looked there for it a little while ago."
"You dropped it on the doormat last evening," Reliance told her. "I found it there and slipped it into the pocket of my apron, and this morning, when I went to get my apron, there it was, so I just hung it up where it belonged." "Well, I'm sure," said Amanda. "That's easily explained." "Who'd have thought it?" said Ira. "Well, that lets us out of another hunt. I won't have to wrestle with the door after all, will I?" So, after all, Edna's early rising was unnecessary, but she did not feel sorry that she had had such an experience, and was content to sit and watch Amanda mold her biscuits, and to help Reliance finish setting the table. Amanda insisted upon giving her a drink of buttermilk from the spring house, to which she dispatched Reliance, advising Edna not to go this time. "You've had one tramp," she said, "and moreover you'll be starved by breakfast time if you don't have something to stay you." The sausages were sizzling in the pan, and the griddle was ready for the buckwheat cakes when Mrs. Conway appeared. "Well, you did steal a march on us," she said to her little daughter. "How long have you been up? I didn't hear a sound. You must have been a veritable mouse to be so quiet."
"I've been up since before daylight," Edna told her. "I took my things into the bathroom so as not to disturb you. It was lovely and warm in there." Then again she repeated her story of the lost key. "Reliance had the joke on her," said Amanda, "for she had the key all the time." "Why didn't you tell me you had found it?"
asked Edna a little reproachfully as she turned to Reliance, who had by this time returned from the spring house. "I thought you would forget all about it, and I didn't think it was worth while to mention. Besides," she added, "I ought to have carried the key myself anyway." "You're right there," remarked Amanda. "It is your especial charge, and you oughtn't to have let anyone else fetch it in. Moreover, you'd ought to have hung it up the minute you found it, and there it would have been when it was looked for."
"Oh, don't scold her," begged Edna. "It was all my fault, really."
Amanda smiled. "I don't see it just that way. Folks had ought to learn when they're young that in this house there's a place for everything, and everything should be in its place. I rather guess, though, that special key won't get lost again right away." Edna felt that she had brought this lecture upon Reliance, and felt rather badly to have done so, but the prospect of buckwheat cakes soon drove her self-reproach away, and she went in to say good morning to her grandparents, well satisfied with the world in general, and content to look ahead rather than at what was now past and gone, and which could not be altered. Before the day had far advanced, came the first of the arrivals, Aunt Alice Barker and her two boys, Ben and Willis. Ben and Edna were great chums, though he was the older of the two boys. Ben was alert, full of fun, and ready to joke on every occasion, while Willis was rather shy, and had not much to say to his little cousin, whom, by the way, he did not know so very well. Edna would fain have spent the morning in the kitchen, from which issued delectable odors, but Amanda had declared she wanted all the room there was, that she had scattered out the cats and dogs, and she would have to scat out children too if they came bothering around. Therefore, to avoid this catastrophe, Edna took herself to a different part of the house, and was standing at one of the front windows when the carriage drove up.
"Oh, Grandpa!" she sang out. "Here come Aunt Alice and her boys! Hurry, hurry, or they will get here before we can be there to meet them!"
Her grandfather threw down his newspaper and laid aside his spectacles. "Well, well," he said, "it takes the young eyes to find out who is coming. I didn't suppose Allie would be here till afternoon. What team have they? Why didn't they let us know so we could send for them?" He followed Edna, who was already at the front door tugging at the bolt. Then in another moment the two were out on the porch while yet the carriage was some yards away. Ben caught sight of them. "Hello!" he cried out. "Here we are, bag and baggage. Didn't expect us so soon, did you, Grandpa?" "No, son, we didn't. How did you come to steal a march on us in this way?" "The express was behind time, so we caught it at the junction instead of having to wait for the train we expected to take. It didn't seem worthwhile to telephone. In fact, we didn't have time, so we just got this team from Mayville, and here we are. How are you, Pinky Blooms?" He darted at Edna, tousled her hair, picked her up and slung her over his shoulder as if she were a bag of meal, and dropped her on the top step of the porch, she laughing and protesting the while.
"Oh, Ben," she panted, "you are perfectly dreadful."
"Why, is that you, Edna?" said Ben in pretended surprise. "I thought you were my valise. It is too bad I made the mistake and dumped you down so unceremoniously." Edna knew perfectly well how to take this, so she picked herself up laughing, and started after Ben, who leaped over the railing of the porch, thus making his escape. By this time Mrs. Willis and Mrs. Conway had come out, and the whole company went indoors, Ben the last to come, peeping in through a crack of the door, and then slinking in with a pretense of being afraid of Edna. An hour later these two were tramping over the place, hand in hand, making all sorts of discoveries, leaving Willis deep in a book, and the older people chatting cosily before the open fire. Aunt Emmeline, Uncle Wilbur, and Becky were the next to come, Becky being in a pout because her sweetheart had failed to make the train, and Aunt Emmeline fussing and arguing with her. "You know, Becky, that he is coming, and I don't see what difference a couple of hours will make," she said, as she gave her hand to her sister, Mrs. Willis. "I'm just telling Becky, Cecilia, that she's very foolish to make such a fuss because Howard is detained. He missed the train, you see, and can't arrive till the next comes in." She passed on into the house, still talking, while Edna made her escape upstairs. She had not noticed the little girl, and Edna felt rather slighted. However, this was all forgotten a little later when her own brothers and sister, as well as her father, were to be welcomed. You would suppose Edna had been parted from them for at least a year, so joyous were her greetings, and so much did she have to tell. She had scarcely unburdened herself of all her happenings before in swarmed Uncle Bert and his family. There were so many of these that for a little while they seemed to fill the entire house, for first appeared Aunt Lucia, and after her the nurse carrying the baby, then Uncle Bert with little Herbert in his arms, and then Luly and Alan and Ted. Cousin Becky's sweetheart, Howard Colby, came on the last train and ended the list of guests. What a houseful it was, to be sure, and what long, long tables in the dining room. Reliance was not able to wait on everybody, and so Amanda's niece, Fanny, took a hand. Thus everyone was served. Edna was rather shy of those cousins whom she had not seen for 2 or 3 years, and after supper preferred to stay close to her sister Celia and Ben, though her brothers were soon hobnobbing with Alan and Ted, and were planning expeditions for the morrow. Ben told such a funny story about the lady by the willow tree that Edna could never look at the picture again without laughing, but he had scarcely finished it before someone called out, "Bedtime for little folks!" and all the younger ones trooped off upstairs, Grandma herself leading the way to see that each one was tucked in comfortably. End of chapter 3.